everyone. Another day. So today we're going to talk about, and this was on my mind yesterday, and I didn't get anything else that kind of hit me. Though there, are things, to talk about. There are things to talk about. Before I got off work, we obviously want to keep Florida State University in prayer. They had a shooting. I'm not going to call it a mass shooting because that's overused, but we had a shooting. I think 2 people are deceased. So obviously praying for the ones that passed away, their families, praying for the ones that were injured and their families. I think they might have got the shooter. I didn't get a chance to really delve into it. But so we're definitely keeping everybody in prayer there at FSU. There's a lot to talk about. We won't get into that right now. Today's topic is going to be our brother's keeper. That's going to be my title. Our brother's keeper. Not, am I my brother's keeper? No. Our brother's keeper. And when I say our brother's keeper, I mean that in a gender neutral term. I know brother is not gender neutral, and I don't believe in that meaning whatever. It means what it means, but I'm just using that phrase out of the Bible to talk about what I'm talking about. So, our brother's keeper. And when I do the title, I may do our brother/sister's keeper. I may do that. So, we're talking about that today because, interestingly enough, we were talking about that partially. We were talking about that on our Bible study last night. Our church does our Bible study by Zoom because we're a small church, and that's the most common sense thing we could do is do it by Zoom. And so the conversation got into that. And I guess I find the topic a little interesting. I guess it depends on who's talking about it. Because people say one thing or use scripture to say one thing, but they do another. So I say that because as Christians and saints, again, we're coming from my perspective, we are supposed to be our brother's keeper. Meaning we're supposed to look out for each other. If one of our brothers and sisters is in need, if we can meet the need, we're supposed to meet that need. We're supposed to be, quote unquote, a family. Supposed to be. Now, my only argument with that is that not that I don't agree with that sentiment. I do agree with that sentiment. And that's the way it should be. But the reality, it doesn't match what's supposed to happen. And I'll just be perfectly honest. I don't think that's happening from a personal perspective in my own church, nor is that happening in my own jurisdiction, nor is that happening at the national church. Well, why are you there? I'm there because that's where God had led us to. 1, 2, we're getting a good word, and 3, whatever issues I may have can be overcome or overlooked because we're getting good word. See, I'm not joining a ministry just because the choir is good or because they got a bunch of amenities. That's not why you join a church. You join a church because you're getting good word. That's the main reason why you join a church, is because you're getting the unadulterated gospel. You're getting good word. Now, if all those other things are at that church, that's great. All that is just gravy. But the reason you join a church is to get good word. Period. If you're joining for any other reason, you're joining for the wrong reasons. Okay? Yes, the Bible tells us to come together, and whatnot. And that definition can be depending on, you can meet in the building or you can meet online. Either way, you're meeting. The church is not necessarily the four walls. I would agree that the church is the people. The church is the people, not the four walls. The four walls is just a building that most of us still like to go into four walls and meet in person. I'm one of them. I like to meet in person. I say that because if we are our brother's keeper, then not only should we know each other better, but we not only should we be able to see when somebody else is going through, but we should treat each other like family, not like strangers or somebody being ostracized. Again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm in a unique position. I should say unique. I am in a position in my church and in my Reformation, in my jurisdiction, all that, where I am usually the only white person that I see until I get to national level. And then there's only a few of us. I can count them on one hand. So that's part of the reason why I'm treated the way I'm treated. Basically being ignored. And it's not pleasant. It's not something I would wish on anyone. It's not something that I desire. But it's hypocritical because these people that do this are the ones that are preaching this, am I my brother's keeper, and that we should be treat folk like family, and we should be able to meet the needs of our fellow brothers and sisters, and all this other stuff, aren't giving me not 2 cents or a mind or anything. I'm being ignored. Not in every case, but in most cases. And what they expect from me, they don't expect from other people. And I understand that when you're a leader, which I am, that the expectations are going to be different. But the expectations I'm talking about are expectations that should be expected by everyone, regardless of title or position. And that's what frustrates me about modern church, is all these folk are preaching being our brother and or sister's keeper, but they're not doing it. So it's good to preach about and get folk all, hyped up and everything else, but you're not doing it. And then you're ignoring people, treating them like an outcast. And I understand. I'm a white elder in a 99% African American church, black church. I'm there because that's where the Lord put me. Our church wasn't founded as a quote-unquote black church. It was founded as a multi-ethnic church. But we've gotten away from that. Not only did the world and society help us get away from that, but the church has embraced the fact that they'd rather be just known as a black church than as a multi-ethnic or an international church. They made that choice. And I'm not saying there aren't people that treat me well. There are, but they're few. And so when we talk about our brother's keeper, not only in a church environment, but even our family. Let's do family. Because they're family, we are supposed to look out for our family, our blood. Now, not all family is good family. We all know this. We all have them. I'm talking about, but even with that, they're family. Okay? You're family. Okay? I would even argue for us that are married that would include the in-laws, because you both married into different families. So basically, you've been adopted into another family. Cool. But even with that, there are problems. And I think there are a lot of families out there that don't treat their family like family, if that even makes sense. They're just kind of all about themselves. They're not even treating their parents like they should. As soon as they leave their parents, that's it. You don't hear from them. They don't call, they don't visit, they don't do any of that stuff. And that's being your quote unquote brother's keeper, is making sure that even, your family, your parents, your siblings, whatever, are okay. They're taken care of. Do you need anything? Is there something that I can do? That kind of thing. And we need to be doing more of that. But we live in a society now where people just care about themselves. There's no such thing, and I've said this before in previous videos, there's no such thing as neighborly almost anymore. If you find you a neighbor that actually is neighborly, you need to hold on to that neighbor. Because that's missing in the world. There's no more, when you live in the neighborhood, if you're doing something wrong, any one of your neighbors could discipline you or whatever. No, that don't happen no more. You touch my child, you might get sued or anything like that. Back in the day, they didn't worry about that because everybody was looking out for everybody. Hey, this is our neighborhood. We're going to look out for all our neighbors, and we're going to make sure we all are good. That's being your brother's keeper. Even if it's non-family, you took care of your neighbors. Everybody looked out for everybody. If you needed something, you could go to your neighbor. And if they had it, they'd give it to you. But that almost doesn't exist anymore. And it's really sad because the Bible talks about these things, but we're not doing what the Bible is telling us. I would argue, in fact, that Christians are worse than the people in the world. Very Again, that's just my experience. I can't speak for everybody. Some people's experiences have been wonderful and great, and they've been surrounded by nothing but wonderful people. That has not been my experience, unfortunately. That doesn't mean I'm giving up on Christ or anything like that. No, because because living for Christ is living for Christ. What people do is what people do. It's unfortunate, it's not cool, but you're not doing it for them. But if you're going to be talking and you're going to be preaching about this stuff, then you need to be living it and doing it. But these folk ain't doing that. So they're hypocrites. They're straight up hypocrites because they're not doing what they say they're doing. They ignore you. They don't say nothing to you. They don't acknowledge you. They don't do any of this stuff. And in the past, we've had to, go to the church for things, and they were very kind to, help us. But what me and my wife have done is we have made sure that everything that we received from anybody, whether it be the church or individuals, we have given back. Because we don't want it to be said that, we got something and didn't return it, even if they didn't expect it to be returned, whether it be monetarily or whatever. Majority of the time it was money. And we always paid it back. Always. Even though, especially as a tithe payer, there should be no issues. But just in case there are issues, we always pay our debts, regardless if they expected it back or not. Because me and my wife don't want it to be said that we did this, that, or so, even though whatever. And people tend to change their minds. People tend to renege on their word. They do all these things. So to squash all that, we just make sure that anything that we've been given, treat it as a loan and make sure you give it back. That way, nothing can be said. Okay? But the problem is that because, well, there's two problems. One, people don't want to do that anymore. And two, people take advantage of the system. There's always the few that ruin it for everybody. Always. Always, 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 always. And in these days and times that we live in the world we live in, people are trying to, they take advantage of people, whether it be the church or individuals. Always trying to take advantage of people. Not everybody, but most. Again, it's all this world we live in now is all about me, instead about we. Okay? And I understand there are things that you have to do to take care of yourself. I get that. First and foremost, you got to take care of number one. First and foremost, you got to take care of yourself. Before you can take care of anybody else, you got to take care of yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is that too many people are living in bubbles, when in reality, it's very difficult to live in a bubble in this society. Or even back in the day, it didn't benefit you to live in a bubble, because it was much more beneficial to be part of a group or a team, because there's safety in numbers. Okay? There's safety in numbers. And that's still true to this day. There's safety in numbers. And so, it's one of those things where are we our brother's keeper? I would say in most cases we're not. And if you are, you're a rare breed. And I think that needs to change, because I think the world would benefit if people cared more. I think the world would benefit if we looked out for each other, especially our family members. And if we're looking at it from a biblical perspective, our fellow brothers and sisters. I think that would be beneficial. I think that would be beneficial. And we need to do a better job. And we got all these churches around here that don't treat their fellow saints and or Christians the same as what they talk about. Or what ends up happening is that they only hang with their clique and nobody else. So they have the few people that they talk to, but then everybody else gets forgotten about. Or what ends up happening is you might have had a relationship in the beginning, but then either something happened or somebody else came in and then they kicked you to the curb and went to them folk, which has happened to me and happened to me and my wife. And these are church folk. I'm supposed to know better. And this is part of the reason why gangs are so popular, because they provide that environment where they are their brother's keeper. This is why young people gravitate to gangs. because they have people that they can rely on, people that will look out for them. Again, I'm not promoting gangs. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is that's why they're such a draw, especially for young people, because they're providing what we in the world and in the church used to provide but don't provide no more. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. If you were to ask me, am I in a family environment when it comes to where I go to church at? I'm not. And again, this is no personal attack on any individual, but I'm just not feeling it, and that's fine. I mean, not fine. Well, y'all know what I mean. It's fine in that they're gonna do. Grown folk are gonna do what grown folk do. So you can't really focus on that. You just have to focus on you. Do I wish it was like that? I do, but is it going to be like that? Probably not. Because people like who they like. They like who they like. Whether you want to admit to it or not, people have biases. And for some reason, people just don't like me and my wife. I don't know if it's because we're an interracial couple or what it is, but people just don't like us and don't want to spend any time with us. And it's sad. It's truly sad. It's truly sad. And when we think we finally found somebody, it turns out to be nothing. They weren't real. They weren't real. So, I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. My wife seems to think that a lot of it, especially dealing with me, is probably a racial thing. And I'm starting to believe it. I used to kind of dismiss it because I used to think people were better, especially church folk, but in most cases, they're not. There are good folk out there that don't care what you look like. They're going to treat you good. And there are some out there, and there are a few that do treat me well. But the majority of them do not. And it's very unfortunate. And it's not biblical. It's not Christ-like. But yet these are the same people that will, preach to you that you need to do this, do that, and act this way and act that way, but they're not doing it. So there's just a lot of hypocrites going on. And again, I'm not trying to slam the church because I'm a member of it, but that's why I can talk about it, because we need to improve. We need to do better, and the world needs to do better. We need to take care of our own. We need to look out for our neighbors. We need to do those things that are going to benefit not only us but other people. To the betterment of society, the betterment of your neighborhood. That's what we need to be doing. So that's what we got to do. That's that's what we have to try to be. Now, as Christians and saints, we should already be doing that, because when you gave your life to Christ, you became a new creature. Old things pass away. All things become new. So if you were treating people that way when you were unsaved, why are you still treating people like that if you are saved? So then I have a question. Not to say that you didn't give your life to Christ, but did you actually change? And I'll be the first to admit, I got stuff I got to work on. Because when I was young, and when I was a kid, I was a social butterfly. There was not one place I would go to I did not meet somebody and befriend somebody. But as I became an adult, and society unfortunately treated me differently, then that's when I started to withdraw. And to be perfectly honest, I'm still affected by that. I just keep to myself. Because I'd rather, you know what I'm saying, it's just easier that way. I think that, I just think that, it's a hard thing to deal with. And so I got stuff I got to work on. But I would encourage everybody that be somebody's keeper, whether it be a family member, whether it be, whether it be your fellow parishioner at your church, whether it be your co-worker, whatever it might be, find somebody to be a brother and or sister's keeper. Because we would definitely benefit from being that way. I would even use another example. That's why fraternities and sororities are so popular. Because you're your brother and or sister's keeper. You know what I'm saying? You are looking out for your brother and or your sister. And and it makes you feel like you're a family. That you have people you can rely on. When they see you and find out, that you belong to the same fraternity, that could open up doors for you. And being your brother's keeper opens up all kinds of possibilities. Not least of which, networking opportunities. I'm just saying. All these things I'm not benefiting from because I don't know people. And, I don't know people that are able to do this, that, and so. I just don't know people like that. And it's really a shame. But it is what it is. So you have to learn, in my case, you have to learn to be comfortable by yourself. And I'm still learning. I've never been a person that likes to be by themselves. I've always wanted to be around people. I like to conversate. I like to talk. I like to, get to know people and all these things. Try to hold on to something from when I was a child. I enjoy that. I enjoy having conversations. But at the same time, you have to learn how to be comfortable with yourself. And I guess once that happens, this stuff really won't bother me anymore. But there's no reason why I should have ever be put in a situation where I have to learn to be comfortable with myself. In a way. And again, I go back to, you got to take care of number one before you can take care of other people. Just like on an airplane, if the oxygen goes, something happens with the oxygen, you got to put your mask on before you put your person next to you's mask on. Because you can't help nobody if you're dying. So, it's the same concept. So, let's be our brother and or sister's keeper. Because I think we'll see the benefits of it. I think we'll be a better individual and just a better society if we were to go back to that. If we were to actually take, for all that are Christian, if we would actually take those biblical principles and actually use them, concept, then we would be better off. We'd be much better off. But we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't, we keep to our own. We have our cliques. You're not on my level. This, that, and the other thing. All these things I've experienced in the world and in the church. The same things I experience in the world are the same things I'm experiencing in the church. No different. No different whatsoever. No difference. And that's a shame. And the church should be embarrassed. It's a shame that my testimony is that. But what can I do? You know, the Bible says, you got to, to make friends, you got to show yourself friendly. Well, it's not for a lack of trying on my part. And it just hasn't worked. So, I'm not trying to do the whole violin thing here. But what I'm saying is, I'm saying all this because I'm hoping I help somebody. Maybe they're going through the same thing. Maybe they feel like they're ostracized, or they feel out of place. And it's not necessarily of any fault of their own, but because people are putting this on you. Because they think you're something that you're not. Or they think this, that, or the other. Or they have an issue with you because of your skin color. Those type of things. But if you find somebody that you can bond with, whether it be other than people who are married and your spouse, that should be a given. But if you can find somebody you can bond with, a friend, whatever it is, and y'all click, then you need to be that person's keeper. And you need to look out. In this world we live in now, you need to be looking out. You need to be your brother's keeper. Because we don't know what might happen from one day to the next. One day to the next. And so I think that, that it benefits us to be our brother's keeper. And not try to just be in our little bubble. Too many people in their bubbles. Too many people in their bubbles. That's why this generation don't know how to speak with folk, because they're on their phones all the time. They're on their phones all the time. They have no social skills, and that's the other problem. Is this generation, this current generation, and maybe even the last one, don't have any social skills. They don't know how to talk to people. They're so used to communicating by social media, they have no idea how to even have a conversation or how to even to form, decent sentences. Of course, we know our education system is just junk. So, they're not teaching what they used to teach in school anymore. So you can't rely on the school system. You got to get your training at home. You got to have parents who care and teach you basic foundational things, so that you can, be successful in society. I'm not saying education is not important. It's very important. But the teaching starts at home, not at school. How are you relying on people at school who may not even share your values, teaching your kid foundational stuff? That's stupid. You should already be doing that. That's why I respect homeschoolers. They're teaching their children exactly what they want them to know, and they're not relying on anybody else to do it. And again, I have nothing against teachers. There are good and bad in every profession. But it is something to see what's going on and how isolated society has become. How it's all about me, and there's no anything about any other people. And again, I've got stuff I got to work on, and the only reason I say that is because of the fact that because I've been put in the position I've been put in. I've had, as a coping mechanism, I've had to withdraw, because that was the only way I could cope, is to withdraw. No, was it the right thing to do? Of course it wasn't. But that was my way of coping. Well, if people don't want to get to know me, people don't want to be around me, then I'll just stick to myself and just stay away. And it worked very well. And when somebody actually shows interest in wanting to talk to me and get to know me, I'm freaking like a kid. Because it's so rare. So we have to be our brother's keeper. And again, I use brother in a gender neutral term. I'm using the phrase. And I just think that it's a shame that in a lot of cases, the world is better about being their brother's keeper than the church is. That's just my experience. I can't speak on anybody else. That's been my experience. And it's not been all churches, it's not been all people in the church, but the majority of them have been that way. And then, again, when people do actually do something, it's just a facade. It's fake. It's not real. They're just placating. Again, my experience. So, the next question would be, well, why are you still in the church? This is why people leave the church all the time, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not that weak, one. And two, in the end, God is who is sustaining me, regardless of how people treat me. And I'm not leaving God just because people don't treat me right. It's just that simple. People are so offended by everything. That's why you got all these people not going back to church, because they're so easily offended. Yes, there are those serious offenses sometimes. Yes, there are. But in most cases, it's all small stuff, and they're just overly offended. Just overly offended. And we can't be easily offended, because as I know, church folk are some of the hardest folk to work with. As I know, they are some of the hardest folk to work with. They're some of the rudest folk you'll meet. They're some of the most I'm trying to think of the word. They're just very difficult. Again, I can only speak for me. Not everybody has my testimony or my experience, but we shouldn't be that way. My testimony and experience should be that every time I run into church folk, I'm running into a brother and a sister. That in reality, the church as a whole, we're all family, regardless of what church you belong to. But that's not the case, because the human species has messed it up and created all these denominations and reformations and racial lines to separate everybody. And so it's our fault. We're not being our brother's keeper. We're only our brother's keeper if they look like us. Or we're only our brother's keeper if, we like them. Or they click. Or they're in our same, tax bracket. Again, just my experience. And so all the other brothers and sisters just get kicked to the curb and forgotten. And overlooked. And ignored. How is that being Christ-like, one, and how is that being your brother's keeper that you so preach about all the time? We have to do better. We as a church have to do better. And the world needs to do better, because the world is so chaotic that we have to look out for each other. I am the first one, or one of the first ones, to greet new neighbors when they come in the neighborhood. Why? Because I'm trying to be neighborly. I'm trying to be neighborly. I'm trying to let them know that, hey, you know what? Welcome to the neighborhood. You're not by yourself. And if I can help you, I will. That's how I am. I'm trying to get out of that withdrawal shell. I try to be neighborly. I just about get along with all my neighbors. Now, again, for the most part, they don't reciprocate, but I have to know, and I have to know in me that I made sure I did the right thing and welcomed them like we were welcomed when we got to the neighborhood. But that's old school. People don't care about neighbors anymore. Everybody keeps to themselves. Don't even step foot on my lawn. Something may happen to you. Whereas if my neighbor's on vacation, their lawn needs to be mowed, I'm gonna go mow it. And they ain't got no issues with it. That's how you treat people. And again, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you pray one day that they'll do the same for you. You don't do it because looking for somebody else to do it, to you, but you're hoping that's what happens. Let's just be real. You're doing it because it's in you to do. But if you're expecting people to be reciprocal, you may be getting yourself hurt and disappointed. Okay, what do you want to do, man? Come on. Come on. And look, I've given him space, and he wants to continue to move forward. Okay. Hey, it is what it is. So, yep, that's all I'm going to talk about. And again, I apologize, I'm driving. But like I said, this is the only opportunity I have to do these. And it's the best time since it's such a long commute. Let's be our brother's keeper. Let's do better. We got to do better. We got to do better. So again, I thank you for watching. I thank everyone that subscribed and liked and left comments and shared. I'm very appreciative. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you leave a comment, be respectful. You don't have to agree with me. Everything that I say is my perspective, my experience. Everybody has different experiences, different testimonies, and you may have a different take on it. Okay? But be respectful. That's all I'm saying. And I will definitely talk to y'all again on the next time, and we will hopefully talk about another intriguing topic, whatever that may be, and hope that again you enjoy this video and it helps somebody. All right, until next time, God bless.